There's a serious distrust about a lot of Americans in how organizations like the FBI, which we need and want to be able to trust, operate, and that they're spending time too much in politics and faith and playing politics instead of just going after the bad actors and the bad guys.
So finally, there are calls from Congress to defund the FBI. Now that the news has broken that the FBI was even infiltrating churches to try to get intelligence on supposed enemies. Traditional and pro-life Catholics were seen to be particularly dangerous. Really? Tonight, we're honored to be joined by the Executive Director of the American Center for Law and Justice, Jordan Sekulow. Jordan, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So I think a lot of people were taken aback when this story broke. And I know when you first heard the news, you wrote that the justice system has descended into a third world, two-tiered entity. What did you mean by that?
Well, you've got, again, those in power, and especially the bureaucracy, which is working hand in hand with the left. I mean, we've known forever that if you go to Washington, D.C., you can pull up people's political donations, that we didn't have a lot of friends on the right inside government. But we did have this basic idea that in law enforcement communities, like the FBI, that those would be impartial, that we could still trust our system of law. And we've seen, unfortunately, the legal system be politicized. But what we're also seeing is specific groups being targeted. And in this case, out of the FBI, what we were told, this memo came out on January 23rd, and there was a little bit of uproar then. But what the FBI director came out and said, well, this only happened in Richmond. It was just a memo. It wasn't acted upon. We found out about it, and we did away with it. And the whistleblowers, so we filed a FOIA. The ACLJ, we went immediately to court. By February 10th, we were in court on filing the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. We're still working on that. And there was a big change, too, right around that time was an election, and that new Congress and a new Judiciary Committee led by Republicans who start asking a lot more questions. So they went to their whistleblowers and inside the FBI who told them, no, that wasn't accurate from the FBI director, Christopher Wray. In fact, this memo went throughout the FBI field offices around the country, and they had taken at least some action. So we know from the whistleblower that came to Congress that there was at least one informant actually put inside a Catholic parish. They came up with the title of RTCs, Radical Traditionalist Catholics. And what members of Congress have finally kind of been able to nail down is that basically means those who take their faith seriously and have a pro-life view, that those groups were going to be radicalized. This was the idea from the FBI. They had no evidence of this, but they thought this would be a group that racially violent extremists might utilize because they share some common goals. And of course, where are their common goals? It's legislation, they said, and judicial decisions. And what just happened, of course, a few months before this in January was the overturning of Roe versus Wade in the Dobbs case. So it's obvious that we have a system of government that treats one group, you can be a violent protester and face no charges. And we see that time and time again if you're protesting for the right cause. If you happen to be on a different political side, you're treated totally you get charges brought against you, you get informants put in your churches just because of the faith that you happen to share. They had no evidence that there was any issue with any specific church or anyone in the church on any kind of crime. They just said, you know what, we think these people are too radical in their faith. And that is, again, a violation of our constitutional rights, but it's also it sends us into, whether we're prosecuting former presidents at a district court level, so a county level, or we're sending informants into Catholic churches because those people are too religious. I mean, that's what they basically said by the radical traditionalist Catholics, that you're treating different people in America based on their religious views. It all violates the law. And that'd be wonderful if we trust our legal system. And right now, if you look at Americans, there's a serious distrust about a lot of Americans in how organizations like the FBI, which we need and want to be able to trust, operate, and that they're spending time too much in politics and faith and playing politics instead of just going after the bad actors and the bad guys and the serious criminals.
So, I mean, if you take their logic to the extreme, right, the Ayatollah and the Pope would be on the same terrorist list. I mean, that's how crazy it could get.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And there are issues. You know, if there was a specific person inside a specific church that was doing this kind of work, organization that's illegal. That would be one issue. This was broad. This was, we need to look at all Catholic churches, and we need to, in our area, and we're going to start turning other Catholic churches against some of the more conservative Catholic churches. It's exactly what was done actually in the Soviet Union and in the Orthodox Church that got so infiltrated by the KGB, now FSB, at the time, that eventually they had infiltrated the church so much they were leading the actual leadership of the church. They became the bishops, the priests. Even there's a patriarch currently in the Russian Orthodox Church who has ties to the FSB. So it's continued. We don't, of course, that's happening in Soviet and post-Soviet Russia under Vladimir Putin. It's scary that our FBI thinks this is the right action to take in the United States of America, putting on par people who take their faith seriously but have no risk and no evidence of being at risk for carrying out any kind of crimes or illegal activity, and just saying, but you know what, they might, so let's go check on them.
You touched on it before about a county DA indicting a president or former president. The polls show that most people agree with the indictment and arrest of Trump, but even more so think it's political. How dangerous is this becoming?
So that's a serious problem. I think there is misunderstanding about the legal system. We do have this idea that no one is above the law, and that's true. But what we've done for presidents, if you look at our founding fathers, they set up a very specific process where they can remove them. That's impeachment. And we saw this go out of control under President Trump, where he faced an actual impeachment. We represented him at the time during the first impeachment trial. And then they tried to impeach him when he was no longer president. And there was something key in that impeachment before the trial in the Senate. The Chief Justice didn't show up. And if you look at the Constitution, to have the impeachment and actual removal, you have to have the Chief Justice. And of course, the president was already removed at that point. This is President Trump, who was now a former president. And the reason why is because we didn't want to set up a system where the legal system would be utilized to go after political enemies, especially at the local level. Because county DAs, there's over 2,300, and that's what Alvin Bragg is in New York. He's a county DA, have a political constituency that they answer to. They're elected partisan law enforcement. And when they start taking these actions, I mean, it's not unusual that New York's going to have a Democrat DA. Not shocking that Manhattan would have that. But if you're going to use it for political purposes, then we are going towards a path of a third world country. Because if we take away our rule of law, which is what checks all of our power structures in the United States, we have separation of powers. We don't let county DAs enforce federal election law. If the Department of Justice has said there's no issues here, and the FEC, Federal Election Commission, has said there's no issues here, then the local DA should not be taking that on. And the reason we do that in America is so that we have a system of government that works. We have law enforcement that people trust. And I think that's why that poll is kind of troubling. On the one hand, people say, well, you shouldn't be above the law. And I get that's the American idea. But on the second hand, if you think it's politically motivated that they brought the prosecution, you have to believe as American, whether you like Donald Trump or not, that it's wrong to bring that prosecution, that that's an illegitimate indictment, because just baseline, you believe it was politically motivated. Nothing legitimate happens under the legal system that is purely politically motivated. That's just, especially under criminal law, that is wrong.
Well, Jordan, a lot of people would say we're in scary times, and I appreciate you coming on Centerpoint here on TBN.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's a time, it is a scary time, but this is a country that's worth fighting for, the ideals of our country. And so we just have to step up and fight.
Amen to that.